Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a few minutes. It's great to be here with you today. So go ahead and get settled in, and we will be starting at the top of the hour. Jeannie West, I see you guys on the line. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure you guys can hear me just fine. If you would type in the chat box, I'd appreciate it. Oh, thank you, Eric. Great. Hey, Karen. Wonderful. Appreciate it, guys. All right, so let's get started. Yay, Antoinette. Awesome. It's so good to be here with you guys. I've been working on putting together the webinar, and this is just such an important topic to me. I think I'm going to put a bit of a spin on it, as I usually do. So, be ready for that. But if you're new to me, I'm Beverly Sartain. I've got people on my list that are starting to engage for the first time, which is really cool because it's really important to me to be able to connect with people, to be able to create a space for people where they feel like it's safe, it's non-judgmental. It's also important to me to challenge people's perspective a little bit, which I think you'll definitely get a little taste of that today. But today is June 27th, and I just want to welcome you all to our talk today. My name's Beverly Sartain, and we're going to be talking about the #1 secret to remedy relapse for good. And this is something that I specifically used in my process, and so it's important for me to share with other people things that worked for me, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be exactly the same for you. But I think that we can all learn from one another, and we can pick up certain tools and skills from people and try them on and see if they work for us. And if they don't, then we need to find other tools and techniques that work for us. So I'm a recovery life coach. I'm also a certified substance abuse counselor, which a lot of people don't actually know. And so I'm actually nationally and internationally certified as a substance abuse counselor, which means I could go to Germany or England or different countries and be a counselor there. I also have a master's degree in spiritual psychology. So if you're wondering about the letters behind my name, that's a Master's of Arts for Spiritual Psychology. And then the CADC is actually Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor. So for the next 45 to 60 minutes, I really want to encourage you to be present. So some of you that have been with me for a while know that I really talk about this a lot. You've taken the time to be here today. I really want to honor that and respect that, and I really want to support you in getting the most that you can out of being together. And a great way to do that is just to allow yourself to let go of the distractions that are so easy to fall trapped to, right? So it's like the Facebook and the to-do list and all that stuff. It really pulls our energy into many different directions. And so I just want to encourage for this next time that we're together that we be really focused on this, because actually what we're focusing on is you. We're focusing on learning and application and just really getting to know your own process a bit deeper. And so a great way to do that, and I practice centering a lot throughout the day. I was actually sharing this technique with my brother over the weekend because he tends to be an anxious person like I have been in the past. And so we were just talking about centering, and it's such a simple and easy tool to use because you can do it anywhere. And so right now, just visualizing yourself, centering yourself. You know, and I really try to visualize like my core or my heart center and just like bringing everything together. So if my energy feels scattered, I really visualize my energy coming together and being really centered, kind of dropping from my head to my heart, taking some deep breaths and just letting go, like noticing, is there anything there for me that's not serving me right now? Maybe a thought, maybe an expectation, or just maybe some tension in my body. So just take a minute to let go of whatever is not serving you right now. And that's a great way to be present, you know, present to yourself, your body, your mind, your spirit, and also to me and the other people that are here right now. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys my experience of resolving issues versus preventing relapse. And so this is going to be a paradigm shift for a lot of people. A lot of people focus on preventing relapse, which is very fascinating to me, because then all of the energy and the time and the attention goes to avoiding things, denying things, etc. And so what I want to encourage you to do is to focus on resolving what is actually driving your addiction or your behavior. So we're not speaking just specifically about substance abuse today. And that's what I love about my community of people too, is that different people have different issues. Some people are working on mental health. Other people are working on cutting. Other people are working on perhaps overeating, you know, so taking the word recovery and thinking about it in a broader term is really important. So again, really wanting to shift the focus from I have to avoid and prevent relapse to, oh, well, why don't I just resolve the issue that's creating the desire to have a destructive behavior? And that way, that's the ultimate prevention of relapse, is that you resolve that issue for yourself for the final time. And so I've already kind of pre-framed this for you guys. I tend to think about things a bit differently. And that's just because of the training that I've gotten and my own personal experiences of getting sober at such a young age and really doing a lot of spirituality work at such a young age. So I tend to have different perspective on some of these common topics that we hear about in the recovery community. And so again, I'm not telling you to believe what I believe. I'm just asking you to try on some of these new perspectives and see if it kind of shakes things up for you a little bit. See if it offers a new awareness for you or a new learning for you that is actually going to support you in improving yourself and your experience. And then at the end of our time together, I've got just a special offer that I created just for people that are attending the webinar or that are going to listen to the replay. So this is not something I'm providing to my list. This is not something I'm providing to other people. It's just exclusively to people that showed interest in this webinar. So, you know, why am I even talking about relapse prevention? When I think about topics to share with people, this is one that always comes to mind. And in particular, I like to share it because of my unique experience with it. So, you know, I'm not somebody who attended meetings. I'm not somebody who worked the 12 steps. I didn't go to rehab, and I never relapsed. You know, so I'm a bit of an anomaly to people who feel like there's only one way to recover, or that there's certain things that you have to do to recover. And so, you know, I just want to start off by sharing that I'm open to all paths to recovery. And in fact, I really believe that we need a variety of systems and solutions for ourselves in recovery. So that's why I love sharing all these different tools and techniques, and also these different paradigm shifts, because I really believe like it's a culmination of all these things that supports us in resolving our issues for the last time and really creating a beautiful life for ourselves. So I'm talking about relapse today also because I just see so many people focusing on the wrong thing, like I was sharing earlier. I see people still trying to avoid, escape, or deny their experience. But what if, you actually used your substance abuse or any other destructive behavior as a way to resolve issues? So many of you have heard me share, like, my recovery process has been used for self-actualization. And I've been through many different things, like many of you, mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, sexual trauma. And so I have found a way to use all of these experiences that people consider to be very negative, and actually use those experiences to become a better person, to find my purpose in life, and to share and to connect with other people. And so what if your behavior was just indicating to you that there's issues that need your time and attention? Because that's what I started to realize. Like, all of this stuff is happening around me, or so it felt. And it encouraged me to go inward and look inward to see, like, okay, what's unresolved in me? Yes, all these things happened to me. But what can I do now? What can I do now to take responsibility for who I'm being? And what if by actually resolving the issues that come up for you, that you could find that inner peace and that self-acceptance and that ability to create the life that you love versus living a life that you feel victim of? Because that's how I always felt. I just felt so victim to everything that was happening. It literally felt like I was like, a bumper car, and like things just kept hitting me, and I just felt totally out of control. And didn't really know how to, like, take the wheel and, go a different direction. So just this, like, paradigm shift of, like, oh, all of these experiences are happening to me. How can I use these experiences to learn from them and to resolve whatever issues have been a part of these experiences? So that's a very different approach than just trying to avoid, going to a party because there's alcohol there, or to, escape a situation that feels like it's too overwhelming for you. And not that those things don't have a time and place, but when that's our number one strategy, we're not ever resolving the true issue. And that's what I'm talking about here today. So my intention is to, shake things up a bit, shake up your views a bit on relapse and recovery, because I really know that there's such liberation waiting for you. There's such liberation in resolving our issues. And furthermore, I'm speaking to you about relapse today because I'm someone who's never relapsed. So granted, it took me a really long time to decide to recover, and maybe some of you can relate to that. It took massive amounts of consequences for me. I had a DUI. I lost several significant partner relationships because of my substance use and other behaviors. I had challenges at work. But most of all, and the most significant, was my loss of connection to my true self. And I didn't really know that at the time. It took getting sober to recognize that, like, the biggest loss of all was my disconnection to my true self. And, now that I am sober, now that I have just created such a different experience for myself, I can really see how important that is, to start to reconnect with yourself and really understand what are your needs, what are your wants, and furthermore, then what's your purpose. So I'm speaking to you today because I want to support you in taking the focus off of what you don't want, which is relapse. And I want you to focus more on, like, resolving your issues, because that is a true way out. That is, it's going through the storm to get to the other side instead of trying to avoid the storm at all costs. So I wanted to briefly talk about the process of relapse. So Terence Gorksky is somebody whose name I heard all the time when I worked at a treatment facility. There was another counselor at a facility that I worked at, and he loved Gorksky. He loved all of his stuff. And, Terence Gorksky, who also goes by Terry Gorksky, if you look him up, He's internationally recognized for all of the work that he's done around relapse prevention, you know, so there's some great materials that he provides. And so, you know, he talks about these 3 stages of relapse, and the 3 are listed here. You know, the emotional relapse that happens is the first stage. And so this could be emotional overwhelm. You know, I hear people talk a lot about being angry or frustrated, or constantly stressed. You know, when you're living in that constant stress, I mean, any of us know that when you're stressed out all the time, it doesn't make for a very healthy experience. It, for him, is that you catch, you know, these experiences that you're having in each of these phases, and that as you go through the stages, it becomes harder. It becomes harder to catch it. So the next stage after the emotional relapse would be the mental relapse. And that's, you know, thinking of relapsing or planning a relapse. For people that use substances, you can oftentimes hear them glamorizing their use, which means like telling war stories about their use and talking about it a lot and kind of reminiscing about it and making it seem like glamorizing or glorifying it, right? Making it seem like it was such a great time. And lying is another mental relapse too. So just the dishonesty that can come when we're starting to work our way towards old behavior. And so then at that point, if you haven't really caught the relapse, then Gorksky, you know, talks about this 3rd stage, which he calls the physical relapse. And, you know, all of us are different, so we're all going to have different things that come up for us, different symptoms or signs here for each of these stages. But for the physical relapse, it could be anything like restlessness or some serious anxiety that you might have. You might notice behavior change already starting to happen. And for people that use substances, it might be, you know, driving by a drinking venue, or calling your dealer, or visiting old people, places, or things that, you know, really have a strong association for you with the old behavior. So these are the 3 stages that are most often talked about when it comes to the process of relapse, is the emotional, the mental, and then the physical. And we all know that once it gets to that physical stage, it is very difficult because the body is having a reaction at that time. It doesn't mean that you can't, you know, not have a relapse at that point, but it just means that it gets harder as you move through the emotional, the mental, and the physical. And so what was really surprising to me is that, you know, I don't see the spiritual on here. So, you know, Gorksky and others don't include the spiritual level. And I thought that to be so fascinating. So I get that people, you know, don't always connect with religion, and there's a lot of people that don't believe in God. But I want to challenge perspective here a little bit again, and really support you in thinking, you know, having some higher thinking here, like getting some altitude on this and looking at this a bit differently. So what if the spiritual is less about, you know, getting fixated on God or higher power, and more about connection? You know, if we can think about the spiritual level as connection, and, you know, of course, if you do resonate with higher power, God, spirit, those things, then that's fine. You know, again, I'm not taking that away. I'm just, you know, encouraging us to look at that connection, because I think it's so important. So I shared with you already that I was completely disconnected from myself. And that's what destructive behaviors do, right? It's disconnection. And we're trying to disconnect from pain and suffering, if only for a moment. That's what we're trying to do. But then the suffering and the pain comes back again. And oftentimes, I always found that when it came back, it was even stronger for me. So it's really a faulty approach to solving the issue. But if you can start to connect more with yourself, when you start to take care of yourself better, or start to treat yourself better through, you know, better self-talk and things like this, you know, that's when we can really see a shift start to happen. So though I studied spiritual psychology, though I've always had an inclination towards the spiritual, like I didn't grow up with any religious training, you know, that's just not how I relate to it. How I relate to spirituality is connection. I always think about connection. I always think about connecting to my true self. You know, so if connecting with it as spirit, God, higher power works for you, go for that. You know, always use what works for you. But I wanted to throw this out there because oftentimes I hear people kind of want to poo-poo the spiritual level, like discount it, or, you know, say that they don't believe in that, when I feel like there's a deeper way to look at this. And I feel like connection is that way of looking at it, where we can all relate to connection. You know, I hear surfers describe a spiritual experience when they're out in the ocean and they're catching a wave. I hear people talk about spiritual experience when they're listening or dancing to music. And I've also heard people talk about spiritual connection when they work with, or when they're just being with animals. So point being here, find ways to connect, you know, and for me, that started with, okay, I've been so disconnected from my true self, from me. How do I start connecting with myself again? How do I start getting in touch with myself again? So we want you to think of the spiritual level as more of an umbrella. Like, that's how I see it. I see the spiritual level as more of an umbrella. And then, you know, the emotional, the mental, and the physical, like, it's still all part of it. And that's why I always share more of a holistic approach with people. Because when you can start supporting yourself on each of the 4 levels, that's when there can be a really great shift that happens. You know, oftentimes we're not taking care of ourselves on any of those levels. Or we're like really top heavy in one area and then not taking care of ourselves very well at all in one of the areas. So we're not trying to be like a perfect 10 here in all of the areas, but we're more so trying to be mindful just of taking care of ourselves in each of the levels. And furthermore, we're really trying to be proactive about our well-being. Because what I've noticed for myself and people I work with is when they're taking care of themselves in each of the levels, the stress is lower, they're better able to manage their feelings, they're better able to manage any negative thinking that happens. So it's just a really great place to start. And a lot of people struggle with, where do I start? So creating a holistic practice is a great place to start for anybody, and it really sets a great foundation so that you can build. So, you know, so when you start to resolve more issues, you can, because you're taking better care of yourself. You know, I'm doing a lot of work right now, many of you know, on the physical level. I've had a lot of stuck trauma in my body, and so I've been doing Reiki and craniosacral therapy for the last 6 months almost. And there's been so much stuff coming up, you know, especially around sexual trauma. And I know that I wouldn't be handling everything as well as I am if I wasn't taking such good care of myself, you know? And so it's just, it's, you know, the holistic approach is such a great way to start somewhere and start taking care of yourself, so that as you can continue down your personal growth path, you can handle what comes your way, because you're actually connected with yourself. You're actually taking care of yourself. I love, there was a participant in the holistic approach to relapse prevention challenge that I just did. And she was sharing that when she is thinking more positively, then her emotions and her behaviors are better, which is exactly what I was just describing. It makes for a better approach and combination, and we're just taking better care of ourselves. So we notice very quickly that we're just managing things better. So I want to share with you 3 myths that are very common around relapse. And again, I know that some of these may be a bit challenging, but just hear them. Just hear them. Like, can you just listen to the myths without like having a strong reaction to it, right? I'm always like a big proponent of neutrality and receiving the feedback. Like, this is all just information. This is all just feedback. And you can take what you hear that serves you, and then if there's things that don't serve you, you just disregard them. And that's just a really great way to approach any feedback that you're getting. So this first myth is that relapse is part of the process. I'm sure you guys have heard this one before because I hear it all the time. So relapse is just part of the process. And who knows where I would be right now if I had bought into that belief. And that's like really a scary thought for me. To think that I would buy into a belief that it just doesn't serve me to think that, you know? So I looked up some stats and, you know, it's pretty staggering. There's not a lot of consistent stats out there, but there's a range from about 50 to 90% of people relapse. And I really think that that's powerful to think, like, how many of these people bought into this belief that relapse is just supposed to be part of the process? So just by having the belief that relapse is just part of the process, it kind of gives people this silent permission to use it in a way that I don't think serves them best. So no one likes to experience the feelings of failure. So I believe that we tell ourselves relapse is just part of the process so that we can just lessen the blow if there is a relapse. But I've been around many people that have relapsed, and I can tell you that it didn't really soften the blow for them. In fact, you know, relapsing over and over and over again can really deplete somebody's self-confidence. You know, and I've seen that too. I've seen people get really, really discouraged and want to give up because they just can't, you know, figure this out for themselves. So I think people are really terrified to just fully commit to the unknown of recovery. It's a big decision, you know, it's kind of like going all in is what it feels like. But it's also an amazing experience, right? When you can get on the other side and you can work through these issues and then you can find this inner peace like nothing that you experienced before. So it is hard to fully commit when you don't know the way or you don't know how. So in my perspective, you know, I think that it's faulty thinking. And I think that it leads people to relapse, actually. So if you, it's kind of like if you expect yourself to fail, we've all heard this, then you're most likely going to fail. And I just don't want to give anybody any excuses to just not fully engage and show up in their process. So it's like, what if you took that off the table? What if you took relapse off the table? It's not an option. That's what I used to tell myself over and over again. It's just not an option, you know? So this works with, you know, substances. This could work with if there's a thought that you're working on that always seems to come in, or this could work with your old story. I mean, this works again with any behavior that we're talking about. You know, every time that you start to think like, oh, well, I could just do that and it would be, you know, it wouldn't feel good, but I could, you know, get back on, you know, get back in alignment and be okay after I relapse. You know, that kind of thinking isn't good. You know, it doesn't work well because it just continues to give us an out. And again, it's a faulty out. We're not really resolving what needs to be resolved. So really, like, just telling yourself, like, it's not an option. And that's what I used to do when I first started. I was just like, it's no longer an option to use that behavior anymore. I have to figure out other behaviors, other coping skills that are going to work for me. And I committed to that. I committed, it's not an option. It's not an option to drink or do drugs anymore, no matter what's going on in my life. So this, you know, this myth that it's just part of the process, you know, we're not saying that if you relapse that you're a bad person or that you're wrong. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. You know, I understand that it happens for people. I just want to encourage you to push yourself and to strive for just like not allowing yourself to justify or make any excuses for yourself. Because when we're in our early stages of recovery, it's so easy to just like justify bad behavior. So we really want to support you in focusing on the way that you do want it to look like. It's just not an option to do that anymore. So the second myth, and this is also, all three of these are biggies, you know, that I hear a lot. So, you know, a lot of people feel like they don't need continued support or accountability. So many people get some support for their recovery, and then as soon as they're feeling a little bit better, they just bail out on the process. I can't tell you how many times that I saw people in treatment that would get just a few weeks of sobriety, and then they would declare that they were miraculously healed. You know, like they're good to go, they're never going to use again. And a few months later, I would see them again, and you wouldn't believe it, but the exact same process would happen. They would repeat the same pattern. And so that was always so interesting to see. And trust me, I have my own patterns. Like, we all have patterns. And, you know, I have patterns that I've worked on and worked through and continue to work through. So I get that there's patterns. But you just want to make sure that you're really going for the healing and not going for the avoiding. So you can see how this is a bit of avoiding again. And healing doesn't just happen in 30 days, right? It doesn't happen in a couple weeks. It usually doesn't happen in 6 months. You know, it's recovery is a lifestyle. And it's really about being a different way of being in the world. You know, a different way of being in the world. And when we can focus on like, who am I being? How am I being in the world? That can help us shift too. Instead of, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. If I do this, then I won't relapse. You know, when we get more in touch and connect more with ourselves and who we're being, that's when I start to see people really get to know themselves better, have some joy in their life for maybe the first time in a long time, and just start to like become open to the possibility that they could care for themselves or love themselves, because that's always a really big challenge for people. So this one shift from doing to being can have a tremendous effect on your process. And resisting recovery just leads to many relapses and more suffering. I used to think of it that way. I really did. Like, I'm just creating more suffering for myself. Is that what I want to do? So instead of resisting the process or cutting, you know, the process short, find ways to engage it. Find ways to learn from it. Find the people that support you. Find the people that lift you up. Find the people that are doing really well and surround yourself with those people. Like, I'm currently working with 3 different coaches for 3 different areas that I'm focusing on. So, you know, I've got 10 years of sobriety now, and I continue every single year. I continue to seek out, you know, supportive people. And it's been such a great experience to do that. And because of that, I continue to grow and stretch myself. And then the third myth is, I relapsed because I stopped going to meetings. Another one I hear all the time. So meetings are fantastic. They're a fantastic tool for recovery. There's great, you know, camaraderie that you receive from being around peers, from being around people that have walked a similar path. But when we say that we relapsed because we stopped going to meetings, like, we're giving meetings all the responsibility here. And I really want to encourage you to take the responsibility off of meetings and onto yourself. So you can use meetings as a tool to support your recovery, but you really want to put, you know, your experience, your sobriety, your life, your recovery, these things are all like responsibilities to you. And using meetings and peers and Support groups as a way to resolve issues that are going on for you. So many people try to start the recovery process by changing the external. So they try to change a job, they change friends, they change relationships. And these are all great steps, but as many of you know, you've got to also change the internal. Just changing the external is not long lasting for people. If you don't heal the unresolved issue inside, it's just going to bubble back up to the surface. It's just going to creep back in, and then you're going to experience what feels like sabotage. But all that's happened is that you haven't really worked on the real issue that needs to be worked on. So I love this quote. This is one of my favorite quotes by Henry Thoreau. So there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who is striking at the root. There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who is striking at the root. So we want you to get to the root of the problem. We want you to go to the root instead of just like if you visualize a tree and you see the branches, like just, you got a little axe or something just kind of hacking at the axe. It doesn't change the root structure. It doesn't change what's going on underneath. And so you can manipulate what's going on externally or try to hack off a branch and see if things are different, but you'll find that they're not. You have to go to the root. And this is just part of the real issue that I see that many people don't get. And so I had, the great honor and privilege to work on the root, to work on many roots when I first started my process. And because I did that, I really believe that's one of the reasons that I never relapsed, is because I went right for the root. I didn't try to hack the branches. I went right for the root. So this brings us to, my number one secret to never relapsing. It has to do with continuous inner work. So going to that root. And you'll see continuous is italicized here because it is continuous work. It's continuous inner work. Like I just shared with you guys, I'm 10 years sober. And now a lot of the body sensation stuff is coming in for me. And so, I could be like, oh, why is that happening now? And, did I miss something along the way? But I really believe the healing process evolves. And I don't know if I would have been ready to do this type of work even 5 years ago, and so I just have evolved to a certain place in my process where now I can do this kind of work and I can handle it. I'm more than handling it, and so that's why I really encourage people to start with that holistic approach of taking care of yourself on the 4 levels, because that is a good way to start to get into, connecting with yourself and get into what is the inner work that I need to do. So recovery is definitely an inside out job. It's an inside out job. If your inner experience doesn't change, why would your outer experience change? Right? And I really started to understand that, if my thoughts don't change, how am I going to maintain sobriety? If I'm not able to manage my shame or deal with my shame, how would I start to feel worthy? Or if I only look at things a certain way, why would I experience a shift? So I really started to think about that, and people don't usually do this deep inner work because they just don't know how. They don't know how, don't commit to it. And it is tough work, but it's extraordinary work. It's transformational work. It's self-actualization, all of these things that are very important to me. You know, for me, being here and evolving my spirit seems like the greatest gift that I could give to the world. You know, resolving the issues inside of me, being a loving person, being a compassionate person, being non-judgmental for other people, challenging other people. But I can't control, you know, what other people are doing or saying, but I can work on myself. And then I can create a community for people that want to work on themselves. And so that's what I focus on, you know. So that inner work has just evolved and evolved and evolved to now a place where I get to share it every day with other people. And, you know, I was somebody that was coming off of substances, you know, I was just getting my mental health under control. So I certainly didn't know how to do this process. And I was never taught a process to be the owner of my experience and my reaction. So I can really relate to not knowing, you know, well, how do you do this? And I grew up in an environment where, you know, the exact opposite was really taught. I grew up learning how to be codependent to my family system, you know, but today is a new day. And so I get to decide if I'm going to stay in the dysfunction or if I'm going to move beyond it. And I've really committed my life to being somebody who can be a great example for my family. Whether they change or not is not in my control, but I can be the person that I want to be today. So I just want you to hear that no matter how that you have grown up in the past, you can learn. You can learn how to be the owner of your experience. You can learn how to be compassionate towards yourself. You can learn how to resolve your issues. So you've learned this valuable insight today, that inner work is really the necessary step to heal things for good, you know, and the inner work is really, I'm going to break it down for you here because I know that seems kind of like a vague thing to say for people that don't know where they're supposed to start. So I kind of thought back to my own process and what that looked like. And so, you know, the first thing that I did was I prepared and made the decision to recover. And I know this sounds super simple, but honestly, I think that this is the point when most people don't commit to the recovery process. I feel like this is where I see the most people not engage the recovery process. I hear people say they want to recover. I don't see them. I don't feel like they have made the decision to really do that. And I know how powerful that decision is because it was so powerful that I changed my life and I never relapsed again. You know, so that preparation and that clear decision to recover is a really essential step for people in their process. And so, you know, just checking in with yourself right now, like, you know, have I made a clear decision to recover again, or am I just saying I want it to be different, but I'm not really letting go of the thing I need to let go of? And people can spend a lifetime in this, in saying they want something different, but not having really inwardly made the decision to let it go. And when you can make that decision, like, I'm really done with this. I'm really done with this. This is not an option for me anymore. Then, like, that's a really powerful thing that happens within yourself. So that's where it started for me. And like I said, it took me some time to make this decision. You know, it was a really difficult decision for me, but I kept having more and more consequences. And so I really wanted to make the decision to let it go. And I did. And then I got really clear that my recovery was my own and that it may look different than other people's, you know? So I didn't really get caught up in, I need to do what other people are doing. I need to do AA, even though that doesn't resonate with me. I just found what I needed to find. So I didn't say I don't want to do that and then not do anything, because that's the other thing I see people do a lot. I don't want to do AA, but I'm not going to do anything now. Like, that doesn't work, right? So, you know, I wasn't resonating with AA personally, but I found what was resonating with me. And I committed to it, right? I did this 2-year spirituality program. And so that was a big commitment, and a big financial commitment, and a big commitment of time and energy. So just be open to finding your own path, but be really proactive and be really engaged in finding what that looks like for you. And then I found the system that worked for me, and the system that worked for me was really diving into the spiritual level. And learning that it wasn't just the spiritual level that I was diving into. I was diving into all 4 levels: the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual, right? And so that was really the system that I engaged, was how do I, dive more deeply into spirituality, but also have that holistic approach to make sure that I'm living a well-rounded, well-balanced recovery in life. And then I focused on, creating greater awareness in my life, observing, separating myself from my reactions. That's all with the awareness piece. I learned new coping skills. So I had to learn how to love myself. I had to learn how to be compassionate towards myself. I learned, self-forgiveness, just a lot of amazing skills that I had never been taught. But I learned them. And then, my thinking, call it recovery thinking, resiliency thinking, just, really being mindful of what I was thinking and how your thoughts create your reality. And so what were my thoughts? Because they were creating a reality that I really was not enjoying. And then just, a daily practice. You can call it a relapse prevention practice. You can call it a self-care practice. You can call it a self-nurturing practice. Honestly, it doesn't matter what you call it. Just that there's some daily practice, and that you're remembering and being mindful to be holistic in how you're approaching it. The big one was the taking responsibility. And actually, taking responsibility is what made me become prepared and make the decision to recover. That was actually the final kicker for me, is that I really didn't want to take responsibility for myself. There was a part of me that wanted to stay in victim. There was a part of me that just wanted other people to know how hard my life had been. And I stayed in that place for a long time, thinking that somehow magically this was all going to clear itself up, and it didn't. It never did. And so taking responsibility for all of it, for my, inability to be happy, for any disturbance that happened inside of me, that's what I took responsibility for. And then just again, that changing the thinking piece is so important that I put it down there again. I really feel like if there's specific beliefs or misunderstandings that are standing in the way of you, being your true self, that's another place to work. That's really, to me, the ultimate place to work. I have a very strong connection to the mental and the spiritual levels, because there's so much change work that can happen there. And now I'm learning so much more about the physical level, and how there's a tremendous amount of healing available on that level too. And the same thing happened for me on the emotional level. So there's great work that can be done on all these levels. So next steps, you've got to find out what needs to be resolved. And you can do that by checking in with yourself. It could be your past. It could be a specific experience that always comes to mind for you. It could be guilt. It could be shame. It could be unworthiness. It could be a specific thought. It will be in your consciousness. People say, where do I start? Just be aware of what's going on in your consciousness, and that means what's present for you right now. Maybe not during this webinar, but maybe there are things that have come up for you during the webinar. But just what's present for you, what always comes up for you. And that's a good place to start, because it's in your consciousness. It's coming up to be healed. It's there. It's available to you. And then, the support and accountability in place is really, really important. And this could be through a mentor, this could be through a sponsor, this could be through a peer support specialist. There's, therapists, there's recovery coaches, recovery life coaches. I mean, there's so many people out there that are available to support you. And again, like, you have to step up to that level of support, right? Again, I hear people say they want things to be different, but then they're not willing to step up to that kind of level of support when that's actually what they need. So a person like a recovery coach or a therapist, recovery life coach, they can help you with that ambivalence. Like, if you're not sure if you really want to recover or not, like, you can work through that stuff with somebody. But just kind of denying yourself the opportunity to be supported is not going to help you get where you want to get to. And then, as I said, I was going to offer you guys something just for people on this webinar. This really came about for me. Let me go ahead and throw it up here. This came about for me because I just got done with this challenge. It was so cool to just hear, like, people's strength on certain levels. Like, some people felt really strong on the spiritual level. Some people felt strong on different levels. And then people would check in with, oh, I don't feel as strong on the emotional level, or I don't feel strong on the mental level, and it was so important for me to get that feedback. And so what I really want to do is, I want to offer a very specific call for people. It's a free 60-minute strategy sessions about resolving issues. And so really, some of you already know what that thought is that always gets in your way, or what that feeling is that always gets in your way. And so I wanted to just offer an opportunity to do coaching with me so that we can just, like, really go to that, really go to that thought, really go to that feeling, and work a process around it. So I've got lots of tools and techniques that I use on myself and that I teach other people. But I just thought, instead of just having a call and, like, figuring out what your blocks are and what's going on for you, that this would be a really specific session for anybody that, is on the call today, or is listening to the replay. And so this is one of those opportunities where it's like, take advantage of this, like, take advantage of getting 60 minutes of coaching around this specific thought, and what could change for you if you resolved this thought, if you started this process of letting it go. What would be possible for you if you didn't have that thought anymore? What would be possible for you if you, didn't connect to that feeling anymore? And this is what I see in people's experience, that it's a thought or a feeling that's standing in the way of their magnificence. And they just keep letting this thought or feeling run their life. So what really comes up for a lot of people is stuff around unworthiness. That's something I've personally worked on myself. And so I really feel skilled and comfortable when working with people around, perfectionism, shame, unworthiness, like these types of things. And I only have 5 spots available for this because I already, have a pretty tight schedule with my individual clients. And so, again, I really encourage you to take advantage of this so that you can get the support that you need. You can get some accountability in place. We'll work on some action steps that you can take over, the next 7 days after we have the call. So this is, again, like, stepping up. And it doesn't matter if you and I've coached before, this is available for everybody. So, feel free to just push the button. It says yes, please on there, and it'll take you to my full slate scheduler, and you can schedule a time that works for you. Again, it's 60 minutes. So when you're looking at the scheduler, you would just pick the one that says 60 minutes, and it'll all work itself out from there. So that's what I wanted to offer to you guys. I don't normally do such a specific strategy session, but it really was made clear to me during the challenge that there's specific levels, and within those levels, there's a very specific thought or feeling that people are struggling with. And so I want to help you move beyond the struggle with this one thought or feeling, so that you can really start to have a better experience with yourself, with other people, and then you can start to create more in your life as well. And then I did want to share a little a client success story, because I just thought this one is definitely applicable to what we're talking about. So I'd like to share a client story. I'm going to call the client Paul for confidentiality reasons. But I recently had a client, and he was really struggling with backsliding. So he was relapsing all the time. And he was undecided between moderation or abstinence. And his process was really showing a lot of inconsistencies in his vision for recovery. So being the coach and sometimes having to have those tough conversations, I asked for permission to share my experience of Paul's process. And he was open to my feedback, and I shared, the confusion, the chaos, and the doubt that he was creating by not being clear about his recovery. And furthermore, I suggested that we put the moderation versus abstinence struggle to the side and do some deeper inner work. That just was coming really present for me as what needed to be done. And as soon as I shared that with him, he started to talk about unworthiness, that he just really felt unworthy a lot of the time. So you can see, like, if you're feeling unworthy inside, then how are you going to create the experience you want on the outside, right? So since focusing on worthiness versus the outer intention of moderation versus abstinence, he's been much more successful in listening to his own inner guidance around his use. So again, when you have that connection going on with yourself, then you're going to start to feel better, and you're going to want to make choices that are more in alignment with feeling better. So his use has actually decreased when he focuses on the inner work of self-worth. So it's so important to just move beyond, these labels of our use or issues and go to the root of the problem. Because if you find yourself backsliding, you can use it as a gift to go deeper and find the truth of what needs to be healed, just like Paul did for you can do that for yourself. So again, we're not like making anyone bad or wrong for having relapses or backslides. Like, use that, use the relapse, use the backslide. If you are somebody that has found yourself having that experience, you don't have to have that experience anymore, but use what is coming up for you and go to the deeper issue. Go to the deeper issue. And if you don't know how to do that, I'm offering you an opportunity to, have a talk with me so that we can talk about going to the deeper issues. If you need to find out what your unresolved issues are and need some guidance and support in, creating a list of unresolved issues so you know what you need to work on, I'm happy to support you with that too in the strategy session. So my hope is that I offered you today some inspiration and just a different way to look at relapse and backsliding. And, if you have any comments or questions, I would love for you to share them in the chat box. We've only got, 3 or 5 more minutes, but I would just love to hear any comments. If there's any questions, feel free to write in the chat box. If you have any other, if you need to get in touch with me, I've listed my website here, recoverylifemanagement.com. You can also email me at bevsartain@recoverylifemanagement.com. I'm on Facebook, which is another place people get in touch with me. So I'd love to hear any feedback that you have, any thoughts. I know it's a lot of information, but I hope that this was also very helpful for you and just like challenging your thinking a little bit. Challenging your thinking. So I'll just wait a few minutes and see if anybody has any comments or thoughts that they'd like to share. These are my two doggies. We just got the one on the right 2 weeks ago. So Peanut is on the left and Ziggy is on the right. And that's Peanut's Yoda toy that Ziggy likes to take from her. So there's always a little fight over that, it seems. Okay, guys, well, I don't see any thoughts or questions or comments coming through. I just want you to know that I am 100% here to support you. I'm 100% here to support you to go to the root of the issue. Like, I want to see people resolve their issues for the last time. You know, I've seen transformation happen in my own life and other people who go for resolving the issue. And so again, if you don't know how to do that or you have questions about that, like, I'm super accessible, you know. Awesome, Antoinette. I'm so glad to hear that. And I just want to acknowledge you so much because, you know, you've really been engaging your process, and that's what it takes. You know, every day we work on ourselves, we work on what's coming up for us, and it gets easier. It gets so much easier. So beautiful job. All right, lovelies. It was so good to be here. I'm so glad I got to share this information with you. You know, this idea of doing the inner work and going to the root of the issue and resolving the issues for yourself for the last time, that is how the healing happens. It's far less about rearranging your external life and thinking that that's going to bring you happiness. The happiness comes from within, and so we have to work from within. And that's definitely the work that I love to do with others. All right, you're welcome, Eric. Wishing you guys an awesome day, and we will talk soon. Bye, guys.